Poor wife sees millionaire husband shopping with mistress her next move leaves. Everyone speechless. A swirl of rumors and questions surrounded Catherine Almeida from the moment she married millionaire entrepreneur Alexander Almeida. She was the sweet, quiet artist who somehow captured the heart of a man known for his ruthless ambition. Whispers in high society circles hinted at scandal, while Alexander's business partners, like the well-known investor Daniel Thompson, saw it merely as a marriage of convenience. Everything looked glamorous from the outside until one fateful afternoon. Catherine, secretly pregnant with her first child, stepped into a luxury boutique, only to find her beloved husband giggling over scarves with a ravishing brunette. What Catherine did next shocked everyone. Catherine Almeida had always been a dreamer. Growing up in a modest neighborhood in Houston, she spent her youth sketching images of a life far removed from the cramped apartment she shared with her single mother, Fiona. Her aspirations included enrolling in prestigious art programs and eventually holding her own gallery exhibitions. But never in her wildest dreams did she imagine she would marry a man like Alexander Almeida, a millionaire heir turned entrepreneur who seemed to wield unlimited power, money, and prestige. Alexander came from a long line of wealthy real estate magnates. His father, Gregory Almeida, was notorious in business circles, feared by rivals and adored by shareholders. The Almeida name carried weight everywhere they went: country clubs, charity galas, and upscale restaurants. Yet for all their power and influence, Alexander's family tree had its share of scandals, rumored affairs, lawsuits, and bitter feuds over inheritance. Catherine stepped into this world fresh-faced and eager to please, hoping that she and Alexander could build a genuine love story despite the complexities. They first met at a fundraiser for children's arts education, hosted by local philanthropist Elizabeth Smith. Catherine had volunteered as an art instructor for underprivileged kids. Alexander, invited as a guest speaker because of his contributions, found himself charmed by Catherine's sincere passion for the arts. She was neither fawning over his status nor trying to impress him. Catherine, in turn, was enamored by the unexpected softness behind his otherwise imposing demeanor. Their courtship moved quickly, fueled by candlelit dinners and stolen moments at her tiny art studio. Alexander would arrive in his black town car, stepping out in tailored suits that contrasted sharply with Catherine's paint-stained smocks. Friends of Catherine suspected the relationship was too good to be true after all. Millionaire heirs didn't typically date humble art teachers. But Catherine's mother, Fiona, was less guarded. She believed in the fairy tale love story and encouraged her daughter to seize happiness wherever she found it. In a whirlwind of romance, Alexander proposed 6 months later in front of a famous mural at the Museum of Fine Arts. Despite whispers that Alexander was simply eager to produce an heir or that Catherine was after his fortune, the pair married in a private ceremony in a sprawling English garden. The press had a field day speculating about the union, but Catherine remained resolute in her belief that love, not money, was the foundation of their bond. It was not until the second year of their marriage that Catherine began to sense something was amiss. She found scribbled phone numbers on restaurant receipts, discovered unexpected travel itineraries that didn't match Alexander's supposed schedule, and overheard cryptic conversations he quickly ended when she walked into the room. All the while, Catherine tried to remind herself of the caring, loving man she fell in love with. Her suspicion, however, was about to come to a head in the most public, humiliating way possible. Catherine's pregnancy was supposed to be a time of celebration. After months of trying, she discovered she was carrying Alexander's child. The morning she looked at the positive pregnancy test, her heart fluttered with excitement and a mild tremor of fear. She knew the weight of raising a child under the shadow of the Almeida dynasty, especially if there were secrets lurking in the background. But Catherine allowed herself a moment of serene joy before the creeping anxiety set in again. As her pregnancy progressed, Alexander seemed oddly detached. His mind was preoccupied with an upcoming business deal in partnership with Daniel Thompson, a famous venture capitalist who was known for investing in tech, startups, and then flipping them for immense profit. Alexander and Daniel had a complicated partnership that extended beyond business. They often ended up at the same after-parties or philanthropic events, forging a quasi-friendship. Yet Catherine sensed an underlying tension. There were too many whispered conversations ending in abrupt, uneasy laughter when she entered the room. One afternoon, Catherine attempted to bring Alexander a freshly baked pie to his home office, an earnest gesture of affection she hoped would coax him out of his stress. To her surprise, she found the door locked. From inside, she could hear the low buzz of voices. Pressing her ear to the hardwood, Catherine caught snippets of a conversation, something about making sure she never finds out, and I'll handle Vanessa. Don't worry. Her heart pounded so loudly she worried they might hear it. Later that evening, Catherine confronted her husband in a gentle, roundabout way, hoping he would open up. She spoke of how she had been feeling lonely, how she sensed his emotional distance, and asked if there was anything troubling him. Alexander's response was affectionate but evasive. He claimed the stress of finalizing a massive deal weighed him down, assuring her that once the contract was signed, they could focus on welcoming their child. He kissed her forehead with such tenderness that Catherine momentarily pushed aside her concerns, wanting to believe his words. Still, the suspicion lingered. Catherine found herself unable to concentrate on her art. Paintings remained half-finished, canvases blank, her creativity paralyzed by the uneasy feeling that something was deeply wrong. She tried confiding in her friend and fellow artist, Rachel Cooper, who responded with measured advice to trust her instincts and consider looking deeper. Rachel mentioned that sometimes people like Alexander, always in the public eye, kept secrets to protect their loved ones. Other times, those secrets turned malignant and threatened everything. When Catherine tried to relax at a prenatal yoga class, she couldn't quell the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Even Fiona, her mother, sensed Catherine was on edge. Fiona offered to come and stay with them for a few weeks to help with the pregnancy. Catherine politely declined, not wanting her mother to witness the tension that was building under the Almeida roof. Unknown to Catherine, the day of revelation was fast approaching. She would soon find herself in a place she never expected, an upscale boutique in the heart of River Oaks, staring at Alexander and a beautiful stranger who would turn her world upside down. The sun blazed overhead, reflecting off the towering glass structures that dotted Houston's wealthy River Oaks district. On that fateful afternoon, Catherine had an appointment with a high-end boutique designer recommended by a local socialite, Lauren Davis. Catherine intended to commission custom pieces that would accommodate her growing belly while still allowing her to feel elegant. Walking in, she noticed the store's lavish marble floors, soft lighting, and racks of expensive fabrics in pastel and jewel-toned colors. A gentle hush enveloped the space, usually the hallmark of an exclusive shopping experience. But that hush was disrupted by familiar laughter echoing near the accessories section. A chill ran down Catherine's spine. She recognized Alexander's voice instantly. What on earth was he doing there in the middle of a workday? Careful not to reveal her presence, she crept behind a row of dresses and peeked out, her heart pounding so loud she was certain he might hear it. Alexander stood by a rack of luxurious scarves, holding one against his chest while a stunning brunette beamed at him. She wore a tight-fitting designer dress, the type that clung to her curves in ways Catherine's maternity outfits no longer could. The woman's name, Catherine would soon learn, was Vanessa Montgomery, a well-known face in certain circles for her boutique PR agency. and rumored to be more intimately involved with powerful men than her professional title suggested. They chatted animatedly, their body language intimating more than a casual business relationship. Vanessa playfully draped a silk scarf around Alexander's neck. The two laughed, and Alexander's hand rested on the small of Vanessa's back in a gesture of familiarity and possession. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. There it was, confirmation of her worst suspicions, playing out before her eyes like a terrible scene in a soap opera. Before she could decide whether to confront them, a sales attendant brushed past Catherine, offering a soft, "May I help you find anything?" The sudden intrusion alerted Alexander and Vanessa. Their eyes locked onto Catherine as she froze in place. The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander's face contorted in shock, scrambling to recover from being caught in such an intimate moment. Vanessa quickly dropped the scarf, stepping away from Alexander with a nervous laugh. Catherine felt her stomach churn. Her palms became clammy, and she willed herself not to cry, not in front of her husband's mistress, not in front of all these onlookers, and certainly not while pregnant with Alexander's child. Summoning every ounce of composure she had left, Catherine straightened her spine. The swirl of humiliating questions coursed through her mind. How long had this been going on? Had everyone else known? Was Vanessa the one behind those phone numbers, the voice on the other end of whispered calls? Alexander opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Vanessa looked equally stunned, scanning the area for an escape route. In that single moment, Catherine saw the entire world tilt. She was no longer the naive wife who believed in happily ever after. She was a woman scorned, with a child on the way, preparing to face her husband's betrayal in the most public of manners. And then, to the shock of everyone present, Catherine made her move. She walked directly toward them, her eyes blazing, ready to expose the truth and to deliver a message no one would ever forget. "Vanessa Montgomery, right?" Catherine's voice rang out across the hushed boutique. She had never felt such a rush of adrenaline. Even the faint scent of expensive perfume couldn't mask the betrayal laced in the air. Vanessa's cheeks flushed a deep crimson, while Alexander shifted uncomfortably. "Yes," Vanessa replied, seemingly unsure if she should confirm or deny her identity. Still reeling from being discovered, she could only stare, wide-eyed, at the woman carrying Alexander's child. Catherine lifted her chin, refusing to show weakness. "I see you've met my husband," she said, turning her gaze to Alexander. He looked as though he might bolt, but Catherine's eyes pinned him in place. She noticed that a few other patrons and store employees were pretending not to watch, but their curious glances gave them away. Alexander grabbed Catherine's hand in a feeble attempt at damage control. "This isn't what it looks like," he muttered, trying desperately to manage the situation. The trembling in his voice betrayed him. Catherine gently removed her hand from his grip. She could feel her baby moving in her belly, a sobering reminder that she had to remain calm for the sake of her child. "What exactly is it, then?" she asked softly, forcing him to look her in the eye. "Because it looks like you're buying scarves with another woman while I'm home, pregnant with your child." Vanessa glanced from Alexander to Catherine, apparently torn between humiliation and fear. "We were just discussing a project," she began, but Catherine cut her off with a steady stare that suggested she knew far more than she was letting on. A palpable tension filled the space. Finally, Catherine turned to Alexander, her voice trembling just enough to reveal the heartbreak beneath her composed facade. "Go home, Alexander. Gather your things. I want you out of the house by tonight." Alexander's eyes widened in astonishment. This was not the timid, adoring wife he had grown used to. This was a woman scorned, a mother-to-be who refused to be humiliated. He opened his mouth to protest, but the fire in Catherine's eyes dared him to defy her. Instead, he let out a labored breath and said nothing. Vanessa, sensing the storm, made a weak attempt to step away. With her head held high, Catherine turned on her heel and exited the boutique, her heart pounding. She scarcely recalled the ride home. The shock and adrenaline coursing through her veins kept her numb. Yet once she reached the sanctuary of her bedroom, she collapsed onto the bed. Tears she had been holding back since that moment in the boutique spilled out in a torrent. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, whispering reassurances to her unborn baby. Over the next few hours, Catherine's emotions seesawed between fury and despair. She wanted to confront Alexander with harsh words and demands, but she also recognized that she was still legally his wife and that the child she carried was also his. The reality of their entangled lives was undeniable. She knew one thing for certain: secrets had been exposed, but there was surely more lurking beneath the surface. Alexander's betrayal was not a solitary misdeed. Catherine sensed layers of deception in his business dealings, in his relationships with people like Daniel Thompson, and in his hidden connection to Vanessa. The time for being a passive observer was over. She would unearth the entire truth, no matter how painful it might be. In the days following the explosive confrontation, Catherine found herself oscillating between moments of quiet rage and painful reflection. Alexander vacated their marital home as she demanded, retreating to a penthouse suite at the upscale Magnolia Hotel. His calls were incessant voicemails, text messages, even attempts to reach her through her mother. But Catherine refused to engage. Instead, she channeled her energy into a plan that would protect her future and her child's future. First, she scheduled a meeting with her longtime friend and attorney, Andrew Patterson. Andrew, a soft-spoken yet fiercely intelligent man, had known Catherine since college. He had witnessed her shyly confess her love for Alexander during those early days of courtship. Now, Catherine trusted him to guide her through the legal labyrinth of separation, prenuptial agreements, and potential custody battles. She needed to know her rights and, more importantly, how to secure her financial stability should she divorce Alexander. Andrew listened intently, taking meticulous notes. He explained the terms of the prenuptial agreement that Catherine had signed. While it offered her a modest sum, it heavily favored Alexander, a condition that Catherine had naively agreed to out of love and trust. Given Alexander's considerable assets and the unborn child's welfare, Andrew assured her they could negotiate better terms. The existence of an affair, if proven, might shift the leverage in Catherine's favor. Yet he also warned her that it could become a public spectacle if Alexander chose to fight dirty. Meanwhile, Catherine began to piece together the puzzle of Alexander's business dealings. She contacted Rachel Cooper to see if there were any rumors swirling in the art world or philanthropic circles about the Almeidas. Rachel mentioned hearing that Alexander and Daniel Thompson were on the verge of finalizing a multi-million-dollar acquisition of an art tech startup. Catherine recalled overhearing the name Vanessa in a conversation with Daniel. The threads started weaving together. Perhaps Vanessa's PR agency was involved in this deal, or perhaps she was more deeply entwined with Alexander's plans than Catherine originally thought. Despite the emotional toll, Catherine forced herself to become strategic. She secretly recorded phone calls and took screenshots of text messages Alexander had sent her, in which he alluded to making things right. She didn't know if these messages would matter in the end, but she wanted to be prepared. She also began attending more social gatherings, quietly probing acquaintances for information. The shift from naive spouse to determined investigator took a toll on her health each day. She felt physically drained, her unborn child sapping her remaining energy. Still, the fire in her heart refused to be extinguished. Behind the scenes, Catherine planned a precise move. She had discovered that a major charity ball was on the horizon, organized by none other than Daniel Thompson. The event was expected to attract society's elite, celebrities, and media outlets. If she made a public statement or took public action there, it would undoubtedly garner massive attention. With rumors already swirling about Alexander's scandalous affair, Catherine knew that confronting him in such a grand setting could grant her the upper hand if she played her cards right. It was bold, perhaps even reckless, but Catherine felt she had little left to lose. The days of quietly painting in her studio, trusting wholeheartedly in her husband's devotion, were over. A new chapter of her life was unfolding, one where she would assert herself to protect not only her dignity, but also the life growing inside her. It was the night of the charity ball, a glittering affair, held at the sprawling Houston Grand Hotel. Guests arrived in sleek limousines, stepping out onto a crimson carpet that led them past photographers and reporters eager for a glimpse of society's best. Daniel Thompson's event promised an evening of fine dining, a live orchestra, and an auction supporting youth entrepreneurship programs. The city's luminaries, politicians, CEOs, and celebrities congregated under the ornate chandeliers of the ballroom, sipping champagne and exchanging gossip. Catherine arrived alone, her baby bump accentuated by a simple yet elegant black gown. The choice of color was symbolic. She was in mourning for her lost illusions, but she was also here to make a statement. Her appearance stirred whispers. Where was Alexander? Had the couple reconciled? Or would Catherine's presence confirm the rumors that their marriage was on the rocks? Spotting a group of Alexander's colleagues, Catherine steeled herself and walked over. Their polite smiles and small talk couldn't hide the awkward tension. Most offered routine pleasantries, while others avoided eye contact. Catherine could feel their curiosity, like a swarm of invisible bees buzzing around her. Yet she greeted them graciously, refusing to let her nerves show. At last, she saw him. Alexander stood across the room, chatting with Daniel Thompson and, to Catherine's irritation, Vanessa Montgomery. Just the sight of the two of them, side by side, made her blood simmer. Vanessa, dressed in a figure-hugging crimson dress, looked every bit the part of a seductress. Alexander, in a tailored tuxedo, exuded the composed polish of a man who believed he owned the room. When his gaze finally landed on Catherine, his eyes flickered with a mix of surprise, guilt, and something else, maybe fear. For a moment, Catherine hesitated. Confrontation didn't come naturally to her. But this wasn't about personal comfort anymore. This was about reclaiming her narrative in a world that had cast her as a passive victim. She took a measured breath and glided across the ballroom. The crowd seemed to part as she approached, as though everyone sensed the inevitable clash. "Good evening, Alexander," she said softly, fixing him with a steady gaze. Vanessa attempted to slink back, but Catherine's next words stopped her. "Vanessa, I'm glad you're here too. I've been meaning to thank you for your role in revealing the truth." Daniel stood to the side, clearing his throat nervously. "Catherine, perhaps we should discuss this in private." Catherine cut him off with a polite smile. "No need. Sometimes, honesty is best served in the public sphere." She reached into her purse and pulled out a crisp, folded document. "I had my lawyer prepare these. Divorce papers, Alexander. I believe they're self-explanatory." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Daniel's composed facade faltered. Vanessa's eyes darted in panic from the papers to Alexander. As for Alexander, his jaw clenched, but he managed to maintain an icy calm that Catherine found equal parts infuriating and mesmerizing. "I'd like you to sign them," Catherine continued, "unless you have a compelling reason why you shouldn't." Alexander took the documents, his face unreadable. 100 cameras seemed to click in Catherine's mind, capturing the tension of this moment. She waited, fully expecting an outburst or a desperate plea. But Alexander only stared at the paper, eventually folding it in half. "I won't sign them. Not tonight. We have things to discuss privately," he said, his voice gravelly with tension. The onlookers, fascinated by the unfolding drama, began to whisper. Catherine swallowed hard, lifting her chin. "If you think I'll just go back to how things were, you're mistaken," she warned. "I'm done being quiet." And with that, she turned on her heel and left him standing there, a swirl of emotions on his face. She had made her move, bold and unyielding. Little did she know, the aftermath would bring an even greater storm that would test her resolve and reveal dark family secrets she was utterly unprepared to face. Following the high-stakes drama at the charity ball, the Almeida household erupted in turmoil. Gossip columns ran headlines like "Catherine's bold move, Almeida empire in crisis," and "Pregnant heiress on the warpath." The entire city seemed to have an opinion on the scandal. Some sympathized with Catherine, admiring her bravery in confronting her husband publicly. Others claimed she was orchestrating a publicity stunt for a larger settlement. A wave of speculation engulfed social media and dinner party chatter alike. Alexander returned to the family's estate the next day, not to live there, but to meet with Catherine in the library, a stately room lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves of rare books. The tension between them was palpable. Catherine braced herself, recalling how this same library once felt like a haven, a cozy space where they'd read together. Now, it felt like a battleground. Alexander spoke first, his voice low and grave. "I'm not signing any divorce papers without a real conversation. For our child's sake, can we at least try to make sense of this?" Catherine regarded him with a mixture of hurt and anger. "Make sense of you being unfaithful? Of you humiliating me in public? I'm not sure there's anything left to say." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched on his face. "I made a mistake, one I deeply regret. But there's more at stake than just our marriage. The Almeida name, the business deals my father's legacy. I can't afford a scandal right now, not with negotiations in their final stages." She couldn't contain her bitterness. "So this is about your reputation and your father's empire, not about me or our baby." Alexander exhaled sharply, grappling with the right words. "I do care about you, both of you. But there are bigger forces at play, Catherine. My father's health is failing. If this scandal escalates, it could ruin everything he's built. I'm asking you to give me time." Catherine felt her resolve waver. She recalled that Gregory Almeida had indeed been battling health issues for months. The older man had always shown her unexpected kindness, even if his business practices were ruthless. Still, Alexander's plea felt too convenient, as though he were using his father's illness as emotional leverage. Their tense conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Enter Daniel Thompson, wearing a tailored suit and a carefully composed expression. "Pardon the intrusion," he began, "but Gregory wants to see you both immediately." The three of them marched up the sweeping staircase to Gregory's private quarters. Catherine hadn't seen him in weeks. Rumors suggested he was bedridden due to complications from a recent surgery. Gregory lay propped up on pillows, his once imposing frame now frail, yet his eyes still shone with the stern determination that had built an empire. "I've heard enough about your theatrics," he rasped, looking from Alexander to Catherine. "I'm too old for family feuds, especially now. My grandson deserves better than this. Whatever you two decide, keep my legacy intact. Understood," he coughed, wincing in pain. "And Daniel," he said, turning to the investor, "make sure this doesn't affect the deal. We need those signatures from the board by next week." Without waiting for anyone to respond, Gregory waved them out, exhausted by the mere act of speaking. Catherine and Alexander exchanged glances, but said nothing, as they left the room. Gregory's words lingered in the air. For him, it was all about the Almeida name and protecting the future of their fortune. But Catherine's concerns transcended mere wealth. She wanted to protect her heart, her unborn child, and her own sense of self-worth. As she returned to her bedroom, Catherine wondered if she was already too entangled in the Almeida dynasty to break free. Despite her heartbreak, part of her still clung to the memory of the man she once loved, a man she feared might be lost forever to the demands of power and deception. All she knew for certain was that the deeper she dug, the more treacherous the family's labyrinth of secrets became. Just when Catherine thought the situation couldn't escalate further, Vanessa Montgomery decided to re-enter the scene with a vengeance. Catherine was at her doctor's appointment, checking on the health of her growing baby, when she received a frantic text from Rachel Cooper. "Have you seen Vanessa's interview? It's all over social media." Startled, Catherine quickly opened a streaming app on her phone, and there it was, Vanessa, perched on a velvet couch, speaking with a popular entertainment blogger. The headline read, "Vanessa Montgomery tells all exclusive." With her impeccably styled hair and an air of contrived vulnerability, Vanessa proceeded to paint herself as a victim in the love triangle, claiming she and Alexander had been in a serious relationship before Catherine ever stepped into the picture. "He told me he was unhappy in his marriage," Vanessa said, feigning heartbreak. "I was there to comfort him. I never meant for any of this to happen." Catherine's blood boiled as she listened to Vanessa spin half-truths and outright lies. Not only was Vanessa shamelessly capitalizing on the scandal, but she was also positioning herself as some sort of misunderstood paramour. The blogger ate it up, showering Vanessa with sympathy while condemning Catherine for publicly humiliating Alexander at the charity ball. By the time Catherine returned home, the media had erupted with speculation. Could Catherine have entrapped Alexander for financial gain? Was Catherine truly pregnant with Alexander's child, or was it a desperate move to secure a hefty settlement? The tabloids showed no mercy, regurgitating rumors and stoking public interest in the Almeida family drama. Determined to fight back, Catherine called Andrew Patterson to discuss her legal options. Could they sue Vanessa for defamation? Was there a way to prevent future interviews that cast Catherine in a negative light? Andrew warned her that a lawsuit would only keep the scandal in the public eye longer. Also, without concrete evidence that Vanessa's statements were false, the suit might stall. It was a strategic risk. Feeling cornered, Catherine decided to take an uncharacteristically bold step. She arranged an interview of her own with a reputable journalist, Marianne Hughes, known for her balanced reporting. Catherine's idea wasn't to fight gossip with more gossip, but to present facts, clarify her standpoint, and hopefully protect her child from becoming tabloid fodder. On the day of the interview, Catherine wore a simple white blouse and kept her makeup minimal. She spoke candidly about her pregnancy, her initial love for Alexander, and the painful discovery of his affair. She also expressed her hope that Alexander would come to terms with his actions and do right by their unborn child. The segment, while not as sensational as Vanessa's, garnered significant attention and earned Catherine a wave of public sympathy. People saw her humility and her genuine heartbreak, contrasting sharply with Vanessa's brazen self-promotion. But even as the tide of public opinion began to turn, Catherine felt the pressure mounting. She was navigating a battlefield on multiple fronts, fighting for her dignity against Vanessa's publicity stunts, trying to negotiate terms with Alexander, and dealing with an increasingly hostile media environment. All the while, the child growing inside her reminded her that her priorities had forever changed. This wasn't just about saving face. It was about forging a safe future for herself and her baby, despite the storm swirling around them. Little did Catherine know, the intensity of the scandal was far from reaching its peak. A seismic shift was about to occur within Alexander's own circle, one that would force Catherine to make the boldest move of her life, a move that no one would see coming. In the midst of the media circus, Catherine found an unexpected source of support: Gregory Almeida, the patriarch himself. One afternoon, he summoned Catherine to his study, an ornate room often closed to outsiders. She arrived cautiously, unsure of what to expect. Gregory, looking haggard but resolute, sat behind a massive desk piled with documents. He waved her in, his voice low and raspy. "I hear you've been busy," he remarked, regarding her with keen eyes that belied his frail condition. "I respect a woman who stands up for herself, but I also value discretion. Let's see if we can salvage this family's reputation, shall we?" Catherine bristled at the implication that reputation was all he cared about. Still, she couldn't deny that Gregory's offer to speak was an olive branch of sorts. She explained how Vanessa's interviews were harming not just her personal life, but also the well-being of the child she carried. Gregory listened intently, occasionally nodding in agreement. Finally, he sighed. "I won't lie. Alexander disappointed me deeply, but he's my son, and you're carrying my grandchild. No matter what happens between the two of you, you're part of this family now." She swallowed her pride and asked, "Does that mean you'll support me in a divorce?" Alexander refuses to sign the papers. A flicker of anger crossed Gregory's features. "Let me handle Alexander. He'll soon learn that my word still carries weight." He paused, his gaze drifting momentarily as though recalling his own past mistakes. "If you truly want to leave, Catherine, I won't stand in your way. In the meantime, keep your composure. This isn't just about you anymore." Despite his gruff demeanor, Catherine felt a small measure of relief. Gregory's intervention might force Alexander to reconsider. She thanked him, navigating the tricky line between gratitude and wariness. In another surprising development, Daniel Thompson reached out to Catherine as well. He invited her to his glass-walled office in a downtown skyscraper. The panoramic view of the city was breathtaking, but Catherine felt uneasy. Daniel was a cunning businessman with loyalties that seemed to shift based on profit. Why was he suddenly eager to meet with her privately? Daniel motioned for her to sit on a plush leather couch. "I don't condone what Alexander did, and I'm not here to make excuses," he began. "But from a business perspective, we need to manage this crisis. The scandal is affecting investor confidence. Alexander might lose control of his shares, which would jeopardize everything, including your child's inheritance." Catherine recognized his angle immediately. Daniel was more interested in salvaging the deal than in helping her personally. Still, any piece of information could be an asset. "So what do you suggest?" she asked. He leaned forward, a cunning gleam in his eye. "Work with me, present a unified front, at least temporarily, to stabilize the public narrative. If Alexander refuses to cooperate, we'll use the negative press against him to pressure him into signing favorable terms for you. Think of it as a strategic alliance." Catherine felt a wave of conflicted emotions. Aligning with Daniel might give her leverage, but it also meant dancing with the devil, so to speak. She knew Daniel's loyalty extended only as far as his profit margins. Yet with Gregory on one side and Daniel on the other, Catherine sensed a shift in power dynamics. She was no longer alone. She had formidable allies, even if their motives were not entirely pure. Even Rachel Cooper stepped forward with a more personal kind of support. She organized a small art exhibition featuring Catherine's paintings as a gesture of empowerment. "You're more than just Alexander's wife," Rachel declared. "Remember who you are. Let your art speak." The exhibit was modest, but it drew a crowd of friends, fellow artists, and curious onlookers who came to see the woman behind the tabloid headlines. For a few hours, Catherine could breathe freely, surrounded by the familiar scent of paint and the silent empathy of canvases that told her story in colours and shapes. Buoyed by these new alliances, Catherine felt stronger than she had in weeks. The war was far from over, but she now had allies on multiple fronts. The question remained, how far was she willing to go to secure her future, and at what cost? As the scandal raged on, Catherine found herself staring down the barrel of another high-profile event, the Almeida Foundation's annual gala, dedicated to raising funds for educational programs, a tradition started by Alexander's late mother, Helena Almeida. The gala was a cornerstone of the family's public image, a night where influential donors gathered to pledge their support. With her pregnancy nearing its 7th month, Catherine knew the event would be physically taxing, but she also understood it was a stage too critical to ignore. In the days leading up to the gala, rumors circulated about what might happen. Would Catherine and Alexander appear together? Would Vanessa show up as his date? Or would Gregory Almeida cancel the entire affair? The media clamored for any scrap of information. Catherine stayed silent, focusing on her plan, which she had carefully orchestrated alongside Gregory and Daniel Thompson. On the night of the event, Catherine arrived at the Almeida estate wearing a midnight blue gown that flowed elegantly around her baby bump. Cameras flashed incessantly as she stepped out of her car. She maintained a poised smile, well aware that every gesture would be analyzed and criticized. Inside the estate's grand ballroom, a blend of classical music and polite chatter greeted her. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, illuminating the polished marble floors. Waiters glided between guests, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Catherine could feel the weight of eyes on her as she walked. Some pitied her, others admired her audacity, and still others gleefully awaited fresh drama. Alexander was already there, standing beside Gregory in a corner. He wore a classic black tuxedo, his demeanor subdued under his father's watchful gaze. Daniel Thompson hovered near them, occasionally whispering suggestions about which potential donors to greet and which cameras to wave at. Vanessa was conspicuously absent, which Catherine suspected was Gregory's doing. Catherine made her way to the stage where a microphone stood. Conversations hushed. This was an unusual break in protocol. The gala typically began with remarks from Gregory or a board member. Yet no one dared to stop Catherine. Her calm air of determination held the room captive. "Good evening," she began, her voice firm but gentle. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to support education programs for children across our city. This foundation represents a legacy of compassion that Helena Almeida left behind. It's a legacy that I hope continues for many years to come." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Alexander. As many of you know, the Almeida family has faced a storm of rumors. I won't deny there have been personal challenges, but I stand here, pregnant with Alexander's child, to say that the future is more than just scandal. It's about giving back to those in need. Whatever the outcome of my marriage, I remain committed to ensuring the Almeida Foundation thrives, so that children have the opportunities they deserve. A quiet gasp rippled through the audience. Catherine's statement was bold, addressing the elephant in the room without descending into tabloid theatrics. She concluded by thanking donors for their generosity and inviting them to enjoy the evening's festivities. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then grew louder as people realized Catherine had delivered a measured, heartfelt address. Gregory nodded approvingly, and Daniel gave a discreet thumbs up from across the room. Alexander approached the stage, tension radiating from him. The applause died down as he took Catherine's hand, guiding her away from the microphone. His whispered words were urgent. "What exactly are you trying to prove?" "That I won't be destroyed by your mistakes," she whispered back, stepping out of his grasp. As the orchestra resumed playing, Catherine felt an undercurrent of triumph. She'd reclaimed her narrative in front of the very society that once whispered she was a gold digger or a naive dreamer. Through the swirl of clinking glasses and swirling gowns, Catherine caught Alexander's eye once more. Something in his gaze softened, as though he glimpsed the woman he had fallen in love with years ago, a woman now transformed by heartbreak and determination. But while the knight's speech won Catherine some measure of public support, it also served as a reminder that the Almeida family drama was far from over. The final reckoning was yet to come, one that would test Catherine's fortitude and reveal who truly held power in this fractured dynasty. The gala made headlines for days. Opinion pieces praised Catherine's composure and pointed remarks, casting her as a dignified figure amid the upheaval. Alexander, too, benefited from her speech in that it momentarily deflected attention from his affair, redirecting public interest to the philanthropic mission. Investors felt reassured that the Almeida Empire would maintain its charitable responsibilities, and Gregory was relieved that his son's transgressions had not irreparably tarnished the family name. Behind the scenes, however, tension simmered like a pot on the verge of boiling over. Catherine was still pushing for a divorce, and Alexander was still stalling. One afternoon, Alexander showed up at Catherine's temporary residence in a quiet suburban neighborhood. She had moved there for peace of mind. He looked tired, disheveled, a far cry from his usual polished self. "I need to talk," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Catherine, taken aback, ushered him into the living room. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, the silence palpable. At last, Alexander spoke. "I miss you," he confessed, voice tinged with regret. "You have every reason to hate me, but I'm asking for one last chance, not just for the sake of our child, but because I still love you, Catherine." For a moment, Catherine felt a surge of conflicting emotions, pain, anger, and an aching semblance of love that refused to be extinguished. "You have no idea how much you hurt me," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "How do I know this isn't just another performance, another move to save your reputation?" Alexander shook his head fervently. "It's not. Vanessa is out of my life. I cut ties professionally and personally." He clasped his hands together. "I've been meeting with a counselor, trying to fix what's broken inside me. I want to make amends." Her heart pounded. Could she believe him? Andrew Patterson had informed her that legally she had a strong case for divorce. Gregory had promised her a sizable settlement to keep the scandal out of the courts. She could walk away, ensure her child's financial security, and rebuild her life. Did she dare consider reconciliation with a man who had betrayed her so thoroughly? Catherine asked for time to think, and Alexander agreed. They continued to meet for counseling sessions, sometimes together, sometimes separately. Slowly, Catherine began to see glimpses of the man she once loved, overshadowed by a man who was learning humility the hard way. Still, trust was fragile, easily shattered. In the midst of this delicate dance, Catherine felt her baby kick harder than ever before. It was a jarring yet beautiful reminder that another life hung in the balance. She thought back to Gregory's words and the promises she had made to herself to fight for her dignity, to create a safe environment for her child. Finally, Catherine made her decision. In a moment that would leave everyone speechless, she stood beside Alexander at a press conference arranged by Daniel Thompson and Gregory. Cameras flashed as she revealed her choice. "I've decided not to pursue the divorce," Catherine announced, holding Alexander's hand in front of a stunned crowd. "This family has caused me pain, but it's also given me the gift of a child. I believe in second chances under strict conditions. Alexander and I will remain married, and we will do our best to raise our child together." At that, gasps and murmurs rippled through the reporters. Catherine then spoke with a decisive tone. "But make no mistake, this is not a sign of weakness. I choose to believe that people can change. If Alexander fails this time, the consequences will be absolute. Standing there, pregnant and resolute, Catherine felt a strange calm. She had just taken one of the biggest risks of her life, a gamble on love, family, and redemption. Whether this move would end in renewed happiness or more heartbreak remained to be seen. Yet for the moment, she stood tall, no longer the naive wife, but a woman in control of her own destiny. Catherine Almeida's decision to stay despite betrayal, public scandal, and heartbreak stunned both her supporters and her critics. Some cheered her compassion and bravery, others called her naive for risking more pain in exchange for a second chance. Yet Catherine refused to live on anyone else's terms. She had confronted her husband's affair head-on and discovered new depths of her own strength. Her choice to rebuild her marriage while setting firm boundaries was as audacious as it was generous. In the end, this story isn't just about one woman's confrontation with infidelity. It's about the will to fight for self-worth, for family, and for the possibility of redemption.
He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, in a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, they grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence. Like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals, Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed. Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank, suspecting fraud or an administrative error. But the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. "You can use the joint checking account for a while." "No big deal, no big deal." Elizabeth's frustration swelled. "You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something?" Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. "Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage." Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. "What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous?" Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. "She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal." Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife. I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money." Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. "Not until we finalize our restructure," he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. "I'll handle everything in the meantime." That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels: business, ambition, excitement." Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out to expose Ava for the home-wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning. Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. "You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly." The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records Elizabeth had, an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her keycard didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled," Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. "You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. "I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. "He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs," Marcus warned. "But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal." It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, The day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares. So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. "I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation." Behind them, a tall figure approached CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with graying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. "Ms. Alberts, I presume?" Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. "You have no idea what you're getting into." But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table, exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections. Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. "I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing." She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. "We should keep personal matters out of board discussions," she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. "These changes aren't just personal," Elizabeth said. "They could affect company stability. Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust, making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe, demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust." A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. "Jordan, is this true?" Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. "This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds." "She's not," Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. "If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter." Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. But she stood her ground. Continuing. "I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain." Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. "I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Ms. Monroe, please step into my office." Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features, But he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves, disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. "Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership." Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest, to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. "Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud." Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. "You can't shut me down like this," he snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. "I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation." Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. "I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan." Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. "You'll regret this," he warned Hartridge. Then turned to Elizabeth. "And you made a fool of me in front of everyone." Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. "You did that to yourself," she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Hartridge said. "I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down." With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, they offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. "Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team." Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. "How can I help you?" Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. "I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up." Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. "You're investigating her?" A slow exhale from the other end. "Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas." Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. "We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that." Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. "Isn't that something your legal team handles?" A rueful laugh. "Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce." Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. "I'll do what I can," Elizabeth replied cautiously. "But how do I communicate with you about this?" Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. "And one more thing," Patricia said, before hanging up. "People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful." Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's Project Next Gen battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. "Keep digging," she urged, "and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details. Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. "That's strange," Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. "Why would he agree so easily?" Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. "Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board." But Michelle wasn't convinced. "I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know." The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. "We need to talk, face to face." She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, curiosity. But she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half-smile, which Elizabeth did not return. "Liz," he began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. "You think—" He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. "I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle." Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. "Amicably? Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture?" Jordan's shoulders tensed. "This is about you and me, not her." "Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney." "She's manipulative," Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. "Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation." Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. "You made me the enemy," Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. "When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home." Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. "I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals." She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. "You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do." A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. "I have to go," he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. Gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her calm and steady. "Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband." Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. "We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play," Gregory continued. "The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure. He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes, if it comes to that." Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. "Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades, tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing, but this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime, and if Ms. Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. "This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation." Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. "Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet." Ava whirled on Elizabeth. "You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me." Elizabeth's blood boiled. "We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours." A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. "Jordan, I need answers." "Were you aware of these trades?" Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed, Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. "If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully," she warned. "We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents." The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. "Have we sent this to the SEC?" "Not yet," the advisor responded. "We wanted to confront them first." Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. "No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars," Hartridge asked. "And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation." Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. "Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby," he announced quietly. "Thank you," Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. "I believe we might need you." Ava's eyes flitted towards the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. "David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust." Hartridge's face remained stony. "I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability." Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on." Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. "Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability." Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. "Stand down, sir," the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. "Let him go." "This is a private matter." Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. "You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises." Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't do that. I'm on the board." "Not anymore," Hartridge said grimly. "I can and I will. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Monroe with you." A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming specter of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her, "You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won." But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members, soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. "I'm sorry you had to endure this, Ms. Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure." Elizabeth gave him a small nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your fairness." She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun, striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him. She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically, and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process. But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy, and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network. Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Jordan never mentioned anything like that. They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature, Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, "You've been very helpful, Ms. Alberts. This case is significant." She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines: Jordan Alberts indicted for insider trading, fraud, and obstruction. Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. "I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities and continue to rebuild my life." Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future.